David Hamburger, and in this lesson we're going to improve your blues by working with chords up the neck. So if we're playing a blues in E, what we mostly need are lots of E or E7 chords and A or A7 chords, and with just a few different chord shapes we can move all the way up the neck. So a lot of people talk about chord voicings, and a voicing is just the way that the notes of the chord are laid out. So in this case we've got the third and the fifth and the root of E, so it's basically an E major chord. Here we've got the fifth and the flat 7 and the third, so now it's an E7 chord. And this next shape, flat 7, root, and fifth, is just a different voicing or a different arrangement of the notes that we had down here. And then finally here we've got yet another E7 shape with the root and the third and the flat 7. Now they're all a little bit different because an E7 chord has 4 notes, the root, third, fifth, and seventh, and each one of these shapes only has 3 notes. So you're always leaving something out, but there's usually enough to tell you what it is you're playing to give you the basic sound of the chord. So here we've got these 4 shapes. This is basically just the top part of an open E chord. This I always think of as being like just a D7 chord shape that's been slid up to become an E. This one looks to me kind of like the top of that B7 chord, like if you just moved it up, this note would be, taking the place of where that open string is on the B chord. And finally this shape just is, it's basically an A7 shape that's been slid all the way up to become an E7. So we have these 4 shapes. And then, this is the amazing thing, if we just scramble those 4 shapes, we can use them to play all the way up the neck, getting A7 sounds. So we take this one to start with, and we go down here, and here's our A7. And then we go to this shape, that's basically this shape, but slid up and using your index finger barring the top 2 strings to replace the open strings you have when you're using it for an E shape. So here we have an A major voicing. And then here's that D7 shape, now slid all the way up to be the 5th, flat 7, and 3rd of A7. And finally, this shape comes up here, and we've got the 7th and the root and the 5th of A7 up here. So we can think about this a couple different ways. You can think, well, if I'm on A, there are the chords I can get, and when I'm on E, these are the ones I can get. You can also think about it going this way as opposed to this way. So if I'm on E, then I could go down to A7, or I could go up to A. And if I'm on this E7, I could go down to A, or I could go up to A7. And if I'm on this E7, I could go down to E7. Sorry, I could go down to A7, or I could go up to A7 up here. So from wherever you are, you can get to something nearby, which is kind of cool. So sometimes you want to just move between chords, between chord voicings while staying on the same chord, right? So that's just moving between E7 chords. So I'm playing triplets, meaning I'm counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and I'm sliding in on the downbeat. So I'm doing a pinch with the thumb and the first chord, which I'm grabbing with index, middle, and ring. So starting 1 fret below and then coming in and then brushing with my index finger for the rest. 1 and pinch and pinch and then sliding up, or moving up I should say, and then same rhythmic figure when you get to here. And you can also go down. This voicing, you can also take the top note off and you just get the 5th, flat 7, and root. And so you can use this sound as a chord or as more of an arpeggiated thing where you're kind of rolling through the notes and creating a melody out of it. So I'm just going up. And dragging my index finger back across those strings just for that kind of sound that's moving sort of quickly. 1 and 2 and the 3 and 4. So you could have a kind of call and response thing. You could do it from here too. You could also answer a chord like this with a single note lick. So just blues scale, right? The root, flat 5, 4, flat 3, root. So once you start to have some of these voicings to play with and that triplet feel, you can move them around and use them in different ways. And then there are very sort of specific licks that are associated with certain shapes, like this shape. A really common lick is to play something like that, coming in by a half step on the 3rd and 2nd string, up to the root, back to the 3rd, and then grab the flat 7. So 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Or sometimes 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So now walking back from the root to the major 7 to the flat 7. And that's often used as a sort of transition from the 1 chord over the 4 chords. You might have or if you can think ahead a little bit, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and, right? So we just made a whole, first line of the blues, first 4 bars, by playing this triplet feel, and then a lick, and go up, and up one more time, and now we're over to A. Now the cool thing about A is it's using all the same shapes, right? So we can take this idea, or, and we can go here. So 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Or we could have some of these shapes. Right, because we've got that for an A7 chord. Or, instead of doing this, we don't really have that open high string that we can use. I mean, we can, but it's cool, but it doesn't really have as much melodic material. So we could keep the 3rd on top and roll through that chord, maybe even do a little vibrato on the chord while you're doing it. Although that's strictly optional. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could stretch out like this, but that's definitely, I can barely do it. So it's just a big stretch. So anyway, big tangent there. And then from here, right up to this voicing. So chromatically, and we could of course come down. And then there are a few licks that sort of exist on their own out of this shape. And one of the most common ones, or most well-known, there's nothing common about it. It's a pretty excellent lick. It has its origins in the 1942 recording by William Brown, a Mississippi Blues. That basic idea. You're coming in from the flat third to the third of this shape, and then grabbing the 7 and the 9, going back to the third, and then playing the 6th in the root, and then the 5th in the root. So you end up on this A shape, but you start out in a pretty exotic location with the 7th and the 9th. And it's the same shape as that single note lick that is kind of a Hubert Sumlin lick. Hubert Sumlin, who played with Howlin' Wolf. So you have all of those things. That you can do as well. But they come out of just knowing that that's A and that you can get up there. So you have all these different pieces that you can put together. And so you can make a whole 12-bar blues out of all of this stuff. The only thing is when you get to the B7, the thing that makes all these other chords work is that on E and on A, you've got a big open bass string that you can play the steady bass with, right? So when you get to the B, you're kind of out of luck because you have to hold down a root. So there's different kinds of ways you can move around and get things out of that position. But typically, you tend to hear people staying around that B7 shape when they get to the 5. So we can keep the triplet feel going, and we can keep, that's that sound. And grab all of that and use those kinds of sounds, and then just really make the most of the fretboard when we're on the 1 chord E and the 4 chord A. So we can have something like this, and then lick, and then climb up. And now we're on A. So there are a handful of voicings you can use to get up the neck. If you would like more ideas and lessons on improvisation, chord voicings, groove, and repertoire, head on over to my website, fretboardconfidential.com. Have fun working on these chords, and I'll see you next time.